Jacksonville is getting ready for war as two UFC champions look to defend their belt, and one challenger looks to become the real deal in their division. Hello, everybody. My name is Danny Segura, and welcome to MMA Junkies UFC 273 preview. I'm here with my colleague Mike Bohn in Jacksonville, Florida. And what a card we got. Obviously, very stacked, two title fights, as I mentioned, and one fight that might be overshadowing both of the title fights.
Yep.
So let's start with that. A little bit of
Yeah.
an unusual card. So let's start with an unusual preview. We got Khamzat Chimaev taking on Gilbert Burns.
Yep.
Huge fight. As I said, it's obviously taking a life of its own. Clearly getting the bigger pop from the crowd. Just real quick, why is this? Why are we here? Why are we talking about this fight right now at the beginning instead of the two title fights?
Because it's a massively significant fight. I mean, Khamzat Chimaev, since he came into the UFC, there's been something special about this guy. I mean, whether you believe in the hype or not, he has done something that every fighter who enters the UFC, mixed martial arts, wishes they can do, and that's captivate the audience in an extremely short span of time. And he's managed to do that in 4 short performances, looking to make it 5 here. This doesn't happen very often, where a guy who has just cracked the top 15 gets a guy who's a well-established top 3 in their division. Credit to Gilbert Burns for taking the fight. So yeah, I think that's why it's kind of taken on its life of its own, as you said, just because Khamzat Chimaev seems to be a bit of an enigma so far in the UFC, and we'll see if he can actually back that up. We'll see if he's as good as all of this stuff says he is, but he's someone who's taken the audience's attention, and that's why a lot of people are saying this is probably the real main event.
Yeah, certainly the people's main event. I mean, this fight is huge. And you mentioned something interesting there. He's taking on right away somebody in the top 3, being ranked outside of the top 10. And that's kind of part of the allure of the fight, right? Because we don't really have a good gauge of where Khamzat is, and I guess we're gonna find out on Saturday. It almost seems like the UFC skipped a step in the matchmaking process. Do you prefer that almost? Because I feel like out of all the fights, this is probably the one that's most up in the air, right?
Yeah, I mean, we just don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I think obviously, some people think they know what's going to happen, and that's why the betting odds are absolutely ludicrously wide for this fight in favor of Khamzat Chimaev. But we don't know for sure. I mean, we don't know. This guy could have a terrible chin. He could get caught with one clean shot. He could be horrible off his back. Like we don't know the answers to these questions because we haven't seen them yet. So hopefully Gilbert Burns will provide some answers for that. It is definitely unique. We don't see guys coming in and getting matchmake like this, as you said. But it's what seemingly the UFC's wanted, what Dana White's wanted, what the fans have wanted. I mean, they tried to do this before with Leon Edwards. It didn't work out. Things kind of got delayed. Then he came back and fought Li Jingliang, who's obviously a respectable fighter, but he's not on the level of a Leon Edwards or a Gilbert Burns. So they go into this scenario, and yeah, man, it's like you said, they skipped some steps, but I think the demand was there for it. The performances from Khamzat so far have warranted it, and here we are.
Yeah. We obviously know what's at stake in the co-main event and main event of the card, but in this fight, what's on the line for both of these fighters?
I mean, I would have said for Khamzat a title shot coming in, but I guess Dana White saying today on the Friday that he's going to fight Colby Covington if he wins this fight. So that is seemingly what it's going to be. I mean, I guess Colby Covington still has to accept it. Things have to work out, injuries, things can happen in fights and stuff. But yeah, like I would have thought probably they would have done Khamzat if he wins against the winner of Kamaru Usman and Leon Edwards, but it seems like they're going a different direction, at least for now. We'll see how things ultimately pan out, but obviously a title eliminator, maybe he still backdoors his way into the title shot. And then Gilbert Burns, I think it's more so just to hold his position. Obviously this would be a big win for him to derail Khamzat here, and obviously he didn't fight Usman not that long ago. I think there is some wiggle room for him to maybe get that rematch at some point. He had the knockdown of Usman early in the fight. Obviously the end of it went pretty downhill for him, but I think he's a guy who has obviously established himself high in this division, and I think he can certainly get a title shot. It won't happen with this win, but I think if he can get like another good one after, if he fights Colby, maybe.
Do you think the same thing is for Burns in the sense that if he wins, the fight to make is the one with Colby, or do you feel like there's something else in store?
Yeah, I think maybe you could do that. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do with Colby Covington, obviously. You could obviously maybe do like Gilbert and Jorge or all these different things. There's a lot of still semi-fresh matchups for Gilbert. He hasn't fought a ton of these guys in the top of the division, so maybe like the Leon Edwards if he loses or something. I think it's going to be a high-profile fight for him. Maybe they could do that one, but obviously I think Colby Covington would embrace the idea of Khamzat Chimaev because the way they've talked about each other in interviews. I don't know if Colby Covington looks at Gilbert Burns and is like, hey, that's a guy that's going to get me the attention around my fights that I want to have. So
I don't think he's ever mentioned it.
yeah, I think he's called him Gilbert a couple times, but like that's being the Colby Covington nickname. But yeah, I don't think he's ever like expressed any real interest in fighting him. So I think, if that happens, Colby will continue to beat like the Dustin Poirier drum and try to do these different things.
Yeah. Let's get an official pick for that Khamzat Chimaev deliverance. I know a lot it's up in the air, but what does your gut tell you?
I'm going to pick Khamzat. I went with him in our staff predictions. I think he's one of those guys that right now I can't pick against him until he gives me a reason to. And right now he's just looks sensational. I mean, you hear everything people say about this guy, the training environment. I know Darren Till has obviously become like a best friend with him to a way, but I have known Darren Till for a long time. I respect his opinion, even when he talks to you when the cameras aren't on about this guy. Like, it's all very legit. So if he's saying that, Darren Till, a guy who's been in there with the very best guys, and he's giving him that level of hype and propping him up, it's hard for me to ignore that. So I think I'll probably continue picking Khamzat until he loses the fight. If he fights for the title after this, if he fights Colby, I'll probably be picking him there too.
Yeah. Now let's move on to the main event. On paper, we have the champion Alexander Volkanovski taking on the Korean Zombie. This is a bit of a weird fight because we were supposed to get that trilogy bout with Max Holloway.
Yeah.
Max Holloway pulled out due to injury, but then he was like, oh no, I'm healthy again. But this fight then was already booked. What is your sense of excitement for this one? Because it kind of feels like we did get a little teased with that Max Holloway fight, and here we are getting Korean Zombie, 35 years old. Not in the best run, but certainly a legend of the division.
Yeah, I think you said it there. It's not Max Holloway, which I think is the fight we all want. We want that rivalry or whatever you want to call it kind of put to rest. But then you look at the alternative. It's like, how can you sit there and not get excited for a Korean Zombie fight? I mean, this guy, 9 main events in a row, bonuses, up the wazoo. He's obviously done it all. The longest gap, I believe, between 2 UFC title shots in history that he's had between the Jose Aldo fight and now. So that's kind of a historic feat in its own right. So yeah, I mean, like, it's not what we wanted, but it's a pretty damn good alternative. No, this fight is not going to be bad by any stretch of the imagination. You're going to pay your $75, and I think you're going to get your money's worth, even that fight just on its own.
Yeah, for sure. And something interesting that Volkanovski said all throughout fight week and in other interviews prior to the event, he kept saying, I wanted to fight the Korean Zombie. I wanted to add that name to my resume. Yeah. Why do you think that is? What exactly does a win over Korean Zombie mean and add to his legacy?
I think it's just that, like, it's part of the grander scheme. Like, I don't think this is the one. There's kind of some talk. I know on Spinning Back Click earlier this week, we kind of had the Alexander Volkanovski featherweight GOAT conversation. That's starting to come up a little bit more. I asked him about it at Media Day. He shooed it away and said, I still have more work to do. But this is part of that work. He wins this fight. He goes and he fights Max Holloway again or some of these other guys. It's just all part of the package. I don't think when we look at Volkanovski's resume, if he wins this fight, we're going to be like, that's the one that did it for him, but it's going to be part of the overall package. So I think that's the way he's looking at it, and I think that's ultimately how it kind of unfolds into his legacy. It's an important piece of the pie.
Yeah. And for Korean Zombie, 35 years old, I mean, you mentioned a huge gap between, the last title fight that he had and this one. Yep. What would it mean for his career to become a champion? And is this a do or die, right? Like 35 years old, do you think this is it as far as any Korean Zombie fans out there trying to watch him in championship fights? This must be it. Right?
Yeah, I think it has to be. Obviously, like you said, he's been around the game for a very long time, and it would be hugely significant. I mean, the first South Korean champion in UFC history, that would be massive for that market. The UFC, I'm sure, would like to go back there if, the world kind of gets back to normal and they can get back to their travel schedule as they, had pre-COVID. So yeah, that would be a huge thing for them in that market. And obviously he's a guy that's extremely marketable for them, even though he's got kind of the language barrier here in the US and, this part of the world. But yeah, I mean, that would be a big time for him. It's something that he's been pursuing for a long time. He's been such a fan favorite. I think people didn't look at him as this type of guy. Like back in the day, they're just like, it's the Korean Zombie, it's the brawler. They think of the Leonard Garcia fights and things like that. But he has turned into a much more refined version of that, a very skilled technical fighter when he wants to be. And I think I think he has a shot of winning this. I definitely, we'll probably get to that. I don't know if it's going to go his way, but I think he's a live dog in this fight. And to get that, it would be like, I think one of those like feel good stories. Sometimes we see these champions get it done. Maybe not like quite in the same vein of like a Michael Bisping, but I think it'd be up there as like a guy like, damn, like it's nice to see this guy finally do that.
Man, what a turnaround it would be for the featherweight division to sort of all of a sudden have it changes all the plans. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, dude, definitely. I know he said at the press conference that, like, I'd like to give Volkanovski a chance at his revenge, but dude, do you think the UFC isn't going to absolutely chomp at the bit to put Max Holloway in a fight with the Korean Zombie? That'd be great. I mean, it would be super marketable if Max Holloway could win that and you do the third Volkanovski fight where Holloway's champion again. There's just all these things that could happen. So, yeah, like you said, it would turn the division on its head.
Your official pick, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I can't. It's kind of one of those things I said about Khamzat. Like, dude, Volkanovski's won 20 fights in a row. He's 10-0 in the UFC. It's ridiculous. And he seems, I mean, those last couple fights, especially the Brian Ortega fight, like, brought his confidence to another level. He seems like he knows he is the man. He walks around like he's the man. He acts like it. And I think that's kind of what's going to reflect in this performance.
Yeah. And just real quick, you mentioned that Korean Zombie has a shot. I feel like some people might not even give him that. What makes you feel that way, and what do you think is the path to victory for him?
I think it's got to be in the first couple rounds. Like, and he, it's Korean Zombie. He can catch you with some crazy shit. So, like, I think that's ultimately what it's going to have to come down to. Like, Volkanovski got out of that guillotine against Brian Ortega, but man, I wouldn't want to, put myself in that situation constantly. And obviously, Zombie's got crazy power. So, if this fight ends in the first 2 rounds, I think there's a good chance Bruce Buffer saying and new. If it goes third, fourth to a decision, almost guaranteed is Volkanovski winning.
Now let's switch over to the other title fight that we have on this card. This is a unification bout. We have Aljamain Sterling, undisputed champion, going against the interim champion, Peter Yan. What do you make of this bout? It seems there is some bad blood, right? This is probably the most heated matchup. Maybe the Khamzat and Gilbert as well, but like this, we've seen a couple of runnings. All in all, like, where would you put this matchup in sort of bantamweight history? Like, it's becoming a bit of a rivalry, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think these guys don't like each other for sure. Like, it seems legitimate. Piotr Yan says a lot of mean things about Aljamain Sterling. Aljamain Sterling certainly has invited them to a degree. It's a very legit title fight, and I think it goes by the fact that here we are talking in this preview, and we're kind of ending it off here. Despite it being the co-main event, we're talking about it after Volkanovski and Korean Zombie, and I think that's justified. I think it's a significant fight that people are very interested in. If they made it the main event of this card, I don't think anyone would have complained, but I think, the fact Aljo pulled out of the fight in Abu Dhabi, Peter Yan was seemingly having, maybe some visa issues and things like that. Maybe they just didn't want to risk it and do all the advertising by putting it in the main event. But it feels that way to me. It feels more anticipated. People feel a certain way about Aljamain Sterling one way or the other, and I'll say it a million times. That's what you want as an MMA fighter, whether they hate you or love you. It's a big deal to have that kind of elicit that sort of reaction. So, yeah, this to me is a pretty big fight. I mean, it's hard to say. There has been some big bantamweight title fights. Obviously, you think about like Dominic Cruz and TJ Dillashaw, like some of those ones, Faber and Cruz. Like there's been a lot of big fights in this division over the years, but this could be right up there. I mean, I think like talent-wise, in terms of these guys being on the top of their game, like I think it's right up there. Like Piotr Yan is ridiculously skilled. Aljamain Sterling, as much as we may want to forget about it, is a really damn good fighter too. So remember that.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I feel like a lot of people are just kind of discarding Aljamain, but prior to their first fight, I mean, he was in a run where he was just...
There's a reason he got that title shot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that's sort of been a mistake from the fan base, sort of forgetting about that? Because he's a damn good fighter.
Yep. I mean, he's doing a good job of making them forget, though, right? Like, it's almost like the Henry Cejudo effect to a degree. Like, you focus so much on the personality and the character that you forget, like, how freaking good this guy is. And there's some questions. I mean, we'll see. He had a pretty serious neck surgery. It's been 13 months since he fought. We saw the emotion when he weighed in Friday morning at the official weigh-in. He was, like, crying on the scale. It just seemed like this meant so much to him. So he's in insane shape. I think we probably are going to get the best version of Aljamain Sterling, and we'll see what's up, man. Like, I think he certainly has passed to winning this fight. That first one was a hugely important learning lesson for him from, a tactics standpoint and all that stuff. He comes from a wrestling background where, those guys wrestle each other a lot, and once you get a feel on the map for a certain guy, you do better the next time. So I think definitely, like, Aljamain Sterling should not be counted out. I think Piotr Yan is probably one of the top 4 best pound-for-pound fighters in the world. So that's, like, I don't think an indictment if Aljo loses this fight. It's not like, oh, he sucks, even if he gets knocked out in the first round. He might just be fighting one of the best guys ever. I think that's what Piotr Yan's going to go on to be in this game. So we'll see what happens. But I mean, Aljamain Sterling put some respect on his name.
Yeah. And another part of a big part of this storyline also is the fact that Aljamain Sterling, by many, is not seen as the real champion, but Peter Yan is. I mean, even in your interview with TJ Dillashaw, which you can check that out later after this preview on MMA Junkie. Yeah, he calls Peter Yan the real champion.
Yep.
So is that fair? What do you make of that? Because I know the first fight, obviously, the way that it ended, it wasn't the way anyone wanted.
Yeah.
But do you think that that's a fair assessment?
It's hard to say. I mean, like, no, it's one of those things that, like, I guess who cares to a degree. Like, no, he's not the real champion. He did an illegal strike and cost himself the title. Like, that's what happened. As much as you may want to be like Aljo, overblow it, and he was faking or whatever you want to say about that. Petr Yan messed up in that moment, and he cost himself the title. Did something that no one in UFC history has done before by costing himself the belt in that way. So, like, how can you say a guy's the real champion when, like, he did something so non-champion-ish, if you want to call it? I don't know exactly how to say it, but yeah, I think I think Aljamain Sterling is the real champion as of now. He'll have the chance to prove it. Obviously, Piotr's the interim champion, so we'll see on Saturday night. But I mean, that's something I'm not stressing too much about.
Official pick for that fight?
It's going to be Piotr. It's, I mean, I think Aljo, I could see him winning if it's like similar to the Corey Sandhagen fight.
Yeah.
Like, all it takes is one mistake by Piotr in this fight. He slips on a kick. He is too slow, like, giving up his back on a get up or something like that. Like, Aljo, he calls himself the human anaconda for a reason, because he can get on your back and, choke you out just like that. So I think he definitely has a path to win, but Petr Yan is insanely talented. I mean, his effort in the Sandhagen fight, all his UFC wins have been exceptional. I mean, you look at his career as a whole, what his losses to Sterling, and then he had that other loss in ACA or whatever it was, where he basically lost because he got 2-point deductions because they forced it, because they wanted to determine a winner in the fight. So, like, this guy could easily be undefeated, barring a few missteps. So I've never seen anyone actually go in there and, like, hand it to Petr Yan, and until I do, similar to, Khamzat and Volkanovski, it's kind of the trend of this, and there's the reason these guys are such big favorites is because we haven't seen it.
That's true. And give us one fight that you're looking forward to besides the top three. What is one fight that fans should keep their eye on? Obviously, besides the top three fights that we just talked about.
Yeah, I don't want to go with the layup of Mackenzie Dern versus Tisha Torres because it's right there. I guess I'll pick someone from the undercard. I guess I want to see a little more Ian Gary. He's a guy, obviously, his UFC debut, I wouldn't call it the smoothest thing in the world. He took some shots, but he won. He got a nice finish and stuff. And, I don't think Darian Weeks, all respect to him and his team and everything, I don't think he's the guy that is going to tell us, like, this guy is a future champion or anything like that. But I just want to see more cage time out of him. Obviously, Ireland in the post-Conor McGregor, run era has really struggled to have, like, a guy. And I think, even though he's not living over there, it's not kind of the same thing as Conor. He's a guy that I think could help, like, carry that market. He wins this fight, maybe they could go back to Dublin to, like, 3 Arena and headline him in a fight night or something like that.
He might not be on board with that, but who knows?
Yeah, right. I forgot they said that. So yeah, who knows? I think he's a guy though. What about you?
I think that was my pick. Besides, obviously, Tisha Torres and Mackenzie Dern. I think Mackenzie Dern, has shown involvement every time she loses. So, giving her loss to Marina Rodriguez, I'm kind of wondering, okay, what kind of version we're going to get.
Yeah.
And Tisha Torres, I really do think she's the dark horse right now of the division. When you talk about all the top contenders, you mentioned a lot of girls, but not Tisha Torres. And she's in a 3-fight winning streak. She can make it 4 in a row.
Yep.
All of a sudden, she enters the conversation, I think, if she makes a big statement. Also, another fight that I'd like to highlight, Venezuela's Piera Rodriguez makes her UFC debut. She had a great Contender Series fight where she got her contract. Yep. And look, she's like basically like an Andrade. Like, for those that haven't seen her fight, she packs ridiculous power for 115. It's crazy. It's almost like if she fought like at bantamweights as Andrade did back in the day, and then she dropped down to 115. So I don't know if I see like a future champion there, but I see a lot of fun fights for her. So I'm looking forward to that one.
Sweet, yeah, that should be fun. I guess if we're doing like local shout-outs, Mike Mallet, lone Canadian on the card, so we'll see what he can do against Mickey Gall.
Definitely. Well, Mike, I appreciate your insight. Great stuff. Keep it locked to MMA Junkie for the remaining of Fight Week. We got you covered with video, stories, anything that you need on MMAJunkie.com. Make sure you keep it locked there. So thank you for watching this preview show, and we'll catch you guys after the fights.